Christmas night, the living room glowed with golden lights, laughter bouncing off the walls. My father stood tall, grinning, as he held out a small box wrapped in silver paper. All eyes turned to my brother Daniel. He tore the wrapping, and there it was, a brand new BMW key fob shining in the glow of the Christmas tree. Everyone erupted in cheers. My mother hugged him. Uncles slapped his back. Cousins whistled. Outside, parked in the driveway, sat the car itself, jet black, polished a giant red bow on the hood. Then it was my turn. I sat straighter, heart pounding, trying to believe maybe this year would be different. My mother handed me a small pink box. I opened it, slowly praying. Inside was a plastic piggy bank, cheap hollow. I shook it. 2 wrinkled dollar bills rattled inside. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, then burst into laughter. My brother smirked, holding up his BMW key. "Don't worry, little brother," he said loudly. "Keep saving. In 10 years, maybe you can buy one of my side." My face burned, my throat tight. I forced a smile, but Inzi. That night, as the cheers for Daniel echoed in my ears, I realized the truth. In my family, I wasn't the son. I was the shaddy. Humiliation didn't start with the piggy bank. It had been my whole life. When I was 8, I won first place in a county math competition. I ran home, clutching the ribbon, eager to show them. My father barely looked up from polishing Daniel's basketball trophy. "Good job," he muttered. Then he turned back to Daniel. Now this At 12 on my birthday, Daniel got a brand new laptop to help with his future. I got a sweater 1 size too big, with the tag still faded from years in the closet. "Practical," my mother said. "Be grateful." By 17, I had learned to expect nothing, but hope. Hope always lingered. Graduation day. I walked across the stage, diploma in hand, searching the crowd. My parents waved, but not at me. They were waving at Daniel, who hadn't even graduated that day. He was just sitting in the stands, already the star of their story. Every milestone of mine was a whisper, while his was a thunderclap. And now at 29, that Christmas night burned the final scar. My father raised his glass, pride dripping from every word. To Daniel, the pride of this family, may his success lead us all forward. The family roared in agreement, glasses clinking. My name was never mentioned. I sat there, the plastic piggy bank heavy in my lap, laughter stabbing into me like knives. I wanted to throw it, to smash it against the wall, to scream that I existed. But I didn't. I swallowed, the fire smiled like a fool, and let the humiliation settle into my bones. In that moment, one truth carved itself deep into me. I would never matter to them as long as Daniel shone. But another truth, one I didn't yet understand, was also born that night. Humiliation can break a man, or it can push him to finally walk away. I left that night. The family was still laughing, glasses clinking for Daniel's new car, the BMW parked outside like a trophy in the driveway. I slipped upstairs, shoved some clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed my wallet, and walked out into the freezing December air. The piggy bank sat on the nightstand. For a moment, I almost left it there. But something inside me shifted. I picked it up, shoved it into the bag. Not because it meant anything, but because it reminded me of exactly why I had to go. My car coughed to life, the old engine groaning in the cold. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The house glowed behind me, full of light, laughter, warmth, none of which had ever been mine. The phone started ringing before I hit the highway. First my father. His voice thundered through the speaker. "Ethan, get back here right now. You don't walk away from this family. You hear me? No son of mine storms out like a coward." I hung up. Then came my mother. Her voice was softer, but sharper in its own way. "You've embarrassed us, Ethan. On Christmas, no less. Do you want people to think our family is broken? Daniel is ashamed of you. We all are." Her words stabbed deeper than my father's shouting. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles white. I didn't answer. Minutes later, a text came from Daniel. "Don't be dramatic, little brother. You'll come back once you cool off. You always do. Not this time." By the time I reached the interstate, I turned off the phone completely. Silence filled the car, broken only by the rattle of the heater and the hum of the tires on frozen asphalt. For the first time in years, I felt something strange. Not peace, not joy, but relief. The next few days were a blur. I crashed on the couch of my best friend Sarah in her cramped one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. She didn't ask questions the first night, just handed me a blanket and a mug of tea. "Stay as long as you need," she said. I almost cried right there. But separation wasn't clean. The calls and texts piled up, voicemails filled with anger, guilt, manipulation, my father demanding I apologize, my mother sobbing, asking how I could abandon them after all they'd done for me. Daniel's smug messages, "You'll regret this. Family is everything. Without us, you're nothing." I blocked their numbers. For the first time, I chose silence. Still at night, lying on Sarah's couch, staring at the cracked ceiling, doubt gnawed at me. Was I cruel, ungrateful? Had I truly become the selfish son they always accused me of being? The memories haunted me. The empty seat at my piano recital, the sweater for a birthday, the piggy bank rattling in my lap. For years I had swallowed those humiliations, told myself love was measured in sacrifices, but now that I'd walked away, a single thought kept me awake. What if they're right? What if I really am nothing without them? Some mornings the guilt hit so hard I couldn't get up. Other days, anger lit a fire in me, so strong I wanted to scream into the walls. But slowly, a new truth emerged, one I hadn't dared believe before. Every call I didn't answer, every text I deleted, every night I survived alone on that couch, it was proof. Proof that I could stand on my own even if my knees were shaking. One night, Sarah found me sitting in the dark, staring at the piggy bank on the coffee table. "You don't have to keep that, you know," she said gently. "I know," I whispered, "but I think I need to remind me why I left." She nodded, sat beside me. "Then keep it. But don't let it define you. You walked away because you had to. That's strength, not weakness." Her words sank deep. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe it. Maybe separation wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was survival. Weeks passed. I picked up extra shifts at work, trying to save enough to move out of Sarah's place and into my own. I ate ramen, skipped nights out, lived lean. Every dollar I earned felt like a brick laid in the foundation of a life that was finally mine. But loneliness was the tax I paid. Birthdays came and went with no calls from home. Holidays passed in silence. Photos of Daniel's life flooded social media, family dinners, vacations, new promotions. He was the golden sun, still basking in their light. And me, I was invisible. Some nights the pain of being erased nearly broke me. But each time I forced myself to remember that night with the BMW and the piggy bank. I reminded myself that humiliation had been killing me slowly, and separation, though it hurt, was the only chance I had to live. I wasn't free yet, not by a long shot, but for the first time the chains had cracked, and that was enough to keep going. Separation gave me space, but it didn't give me peace. At first, I told myself I was strong. I was working extra shifts, saving money, making my own choices. No more humiliation at the dinner table. No more being told that Daniel was the son and I was just orbiting around him. I thought I had broken free, but freedom can be heavy. The first crack came at work. My boss called me into his office one grey morning. He was polite, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. "Ethan," he said, tapping a pen against his desk, "your father came by last week." My stomach dropped. He said some things about you being reckless, walking out on your family, not being trustworthy. I don't like to get involved in personal matters, but it raises concerns, especially for someone in your position. I sat there numb, nodding while my insides twisted. My father had followed me carrying his judgment into the one place I thought was safe. From then on, work wasn't the same. Colleagues looked at me differently, whispers rising when I walked past. Projects I once led were handed to others. One by one, opportunities slipped through my fingers. At the same time, Daniel kept shining. I didn't need my parents to tell me I saw it all over social media. New promotions, new suits, vacations in Europe, smiling photos with my parents at his side, glowing with pride. Captions like, "So proud of our son, always their son, never me." The more he rose, the smaller I felt. I started isolating myself. Sarah invited me out with friends, tried to drag me to dinners, but I always found excuses. "I'm tired," I'd say, or "next time." Truth was, I couldn't bear to sit at a table, surrounded by laughter and warmth, not when I felt like a fraud. Nights became my enemy. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, mind racing with every memory of being overlooked. The piano recital at 8, the graduation stage at 17, the piggy bank at 29. A cruel reel on repeat. Whiskey dulled it, at least for a while. At first, just a drink to help me sleep. Then another to take the edge off the next day. Soon the bottles piled up, amber glass clinking when I kicked them by accident. I told myself I was in control, but I wasn't. One night I woke up on Sarah's couch, the carpet damp beneath me where I'd spilled half a bottle. My head throbbed, my mouth dry. The piggy bank sat on the table, mocking me with its hollow rattle. I threw it against the wall, watched it crack, 2 wrinkled bills fluttering to the floor. I collapsed beside it, sobbing until my chest hurt. The next day I taped the piggy bank back together. I couldn't throw it away. As much as I hated it, it was a reminder of where I came from and why I was falling. Bills piled up. The landlord slid notices under the door. My boss finally told me to take some time off, the polite way of saying I was no longer needed. Days blurred. I stopped shaving, stopped answering calls, stopped looking in the mirror. When I did glance, the man staring back at me was hollow-eyed, grey-skinned, broken. Not the forgotten son anymore, but a ghost. The lowest point came one freezing night in January. The power had been shut off. I hadn't paid the bill. I sat in the dark, wrapped in a blanket, candles flickering weakly around me. On the table was a half-empty bottle of whiskey and a bottle of pills prescribed for anxiety months earlier. I stared at them for hours. My mind whispered, "End it." No one would notice. Daniel would shine brighter without your shadow dragging him down. Your parents would be relieved. Sarah would move on. My hand shook as I reached for the pills. Then my eyes landed on something half buried under a stack of unopened mail, a photograph. It was me at 10 years old holding a small science fair ribbon. My smile was wide, genuine, untouched by disappointment. I had scrawled something on the back in clumsy handwriting, "One day I'll matter." The bottle slipped from my hand. I clutched the photo to my chest, sobbing so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I didn't take the pills. But that night, I understood something terrifying. Humiliation had followed me even here. And running hadn't saved me. I was at rock bottom. But sometimes rock bottom is the only place strong enough to build on. Because in the days that followed, a knock would come at my door. Not my father's, not Daniel's. Someone else. Someone who would remind me that love can come from unexpected places, and that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't finished yet. The days after that January night were a haze. I moved through the apartment like a ghost, stepping over empty bottles, unopened envelopes, clothes that hadn't been washed in weeks. The photo of 10-year-old me with the science fair ribbon sat propped against the cracked piggy bank, the words, "One day I'll matter," staring back like a challenge I wasn't sure I could meet. I didn't leave the apartment. I didn't answer calls. I barely ate. Time felt like a long grey corridor with no doors, no windows, just endless walking with no destination. Until the knock came. At first I ignored it. 3 short raps on the door, then silence. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, willing the sound to fade, but it came again, louder this time. "Ethan, it's Eleanor Bennett. Open up, dear." I froze. Mrs. Bennett. My old neighbour from the house I'd left behind. She had lived across the street for as long as I could remember. She was the kind of woman who baked pies for holidays, who remembered birthdays, who gave cookies to the neighborhood kids, even when their own parents forgot. When I was 12, mowing lawns for extra cash, she had been my best customer and my most loyal cheerleader. I stumbled to the door, ashamed of the mess behind me. When I cracked it open, her sharp eyes swept over me, my unshaven face, hollow eyes, the sour smell of whiskey clinging to my clothes. She didn't flinch. "Good Lord, child," she muttered, pushing past me with surprising strength for someone in her 70s. She carried a bag in one hand and a Tupperware container in the other. "This place smells worse than my attic. Sit down." I obeyed like I was 12 again. She set the food on the table, then began opening windows, tossing bottles into a trash bag, muttering under her breath. "Your mother always did dote on Daniel, but this is what they've reduced you to." Shame burned through me. I wanted to defend my parents, even after everything. "It's not their fault," I mumbled. "It's me. I'm the one who can't hold it together." Eleanor stopped fixing me with a look so piercing it silenced me. Then she set a steaming bowl of stew in front of me. "Eat," she said. I picked up the spoon, hands trembling. The first mouthful nearly broke me. The warmth spread through my chest, a comfort I hadn't felt in years. Tears welled up and spilled into the bowl before I could stop them. "They don't care about me," I choked. "I gave them everything, every chance, every sacrifice, and I'm still nothing." Eleanor sat across from me, folding her hands. "Families can be blind, Ethan. Sometimes they don't see what's right in front of them. But listen to me. Your worth isn't theirs to measure." I shook my head, but they made me believe it. Every time they looked past me, every time they praised him instead, it carved me hollow. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was meant to be nothing. Her eyes softened, but her voice grew firm. "No. You've been measuring yourself by a broken ruler. You think love only counts if it comes from them. But love is bigger than blood. You can choose who you call family." The words hit me like a hammer. Love is bigger than blood. I wanted to argue, to cling to the pain, because it was all I knew. But then she reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. It was me. Younger, awkward, sweaty, from mowing her lawn, holding a cookie with a grin too wide for my face. She had kept it all these years. "You mattered then," she said quietly. "You matter now. You don't need their applause to prove it." I broke down, sobbing harder than I had in years. Eleanor didn't try to hush me. She just sat there letting me empty the poison I'd been carrying since childhood. Over the next week she came often, sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit. Other times she dragged me out for short walks, scolding me if I resisted. Slowly the fog lifted. One evening, as we sat on her porch drinking tea, she looked out at the lake shimmering in the distance. "You need a fresh start," she said. "Somewhere that's yours. Not a couch, not an apartment where ghosts follow you. Buy a place. A cabin. Something small. Build it into your own." I laughed bitterly. "With what money? I can barely pay rent." "You've been saving," she said, eyes twinkling. "I remember you telling me once you wanted a house by the water. Use it. And if it's not enough, borrow. You're young, Ethan. You have time to build." Her confidence in me felt absurd, but it planted a seed. That night, I dug through my finances. Savings from years of overtime, a small severance from my job, a line of credit I had barely touched. It wasn't much, but maybe, just maybe enough. A week later, I stood in front of a cabin by the lake. It was old, sagging, with a roof that leaked and steps that creaked. The realtor looked at me like I was crazy. But as I walked through the dusty rooms, sunlight streaming through broken blinds, I felt something I hadn't in years. Possibility. I signed the papers with trembling hands. The first night I slept there, the air was cold, the floors uneven, the walls smelling of cedar and dust. But it was mine. Not Richard's, not Margaret's, not Daniel's. Mine. I sat on the porch, the lake rippling under the moonlight, and realized something humiliation had driven me here, and downfall had nearly ended me. But this cabin was the first brick in something new.
Maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe love was bigger than blood. Maybe, just maybe, I could build a family of my own.
The cabin was a wreck. The first morning I woke there, sunlight cut through the dusty blinds, revealing peeling paint, sagging floorboards and cobwebs clinging to every corner. The place smelled of cedar and mildew, like it had been waiting decades for someone to care. Most people would have called it worthless, but to me it was possibility. I started small. A loose step on the porch, a leaky faucet in the kitchen. My hands were clumsy at first, out of practice from too many years, holding bottles instead of tools. But each nail I hammered, each board, I sanded each brushstroke of fresh paint, it pulled me back to life piece by piece. Word got around. Sarah came by first, shaking her head at the state of things, but rolling up her sleeves anyway. "If you fall through that floor, don't expect me to carry you," she teased, handing me a toolbox. Soon more friends showed up, guys from old jobs, neighbors I barely knew. They brought drills, saws, pizza boxes, and cheap beer. We worked all day, then sat around the fire pit at night telling stories until the stars faded. For the first time in years, I wasn't just existing, I was part of something. The cabin began to change. Walls once grey and lifeless turned bright with fresh paint. Broken shelves were replaced with ones I built myself. We strung lights across the porch, patched the roof, fixed the windows. Every improvement felt like a scar, healing still visible, but stronger than before.
And I changed with it. I made rules for myself. No bottles in the house. If the urge came, I picked up a hammer instead. No answering calls from people who only remembered me when they needed something. Instead, I answered the door to friends who brought laughter and loyalty.
Nights were different now. Instead of staring at the ceiling in despair, I sat by the fireplace scribbling in a journal. At first the words bled anger. They never saw me. They never cared. But as the weeks passed, the entries softened. Today I built a table. It wobbles, but it held dinner. That's enough. It was the first time in my life I allowed enough to feel like victory. Autumn came painting the lake in gold and crimson. That's when I decided to do something I never thought I would again, throw a birthday party. For me, the idea terrified me. Memories of lonely birthdays, of sweaters 2 sizes too big, of forgotten cakes haunted me. But I pushed through the fear. I invited Sarah, the neighbors, the friends who had hammered nails beside me. I told myself, if one person shows up, it will be enough. On the night of the party, the cabin glowed with string lights we'd hung across the porch. The table I built groaned under the weight of food everyone had brought. Laughter filled the rooms that once echoed with silence. When they brought out the cake, homemade uneven, the frosting sliding to one side, I nearly broke. They sang off-key but loud, their voices wrapping around me like the family chorus I had chased all my life. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and blew out the candles. For the first time, my wish wasn't desperate. It wasn't please let them see me. It was simple. Let me keep this. Let me hold on to the people who choose me. After everyone left, I stood alone on the porch, looking out at the lake, shimmering under the moonlight. The piggy bank sat on the railing, taped back together, from when I had smashed it months earlier. For the first time, it didn't feel like a curse. It felt like a reminder of where I had been and how far I had come. The next morning, I picked up the phone, not to call my family, not yet, but to call a contractor to ask about fixing the chimney. It may sound small, but for me, it was a declaration I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. And building wasn't just about wood and nails. It was about trust, laughter, late nights with friends, and learning that love doesn't have to be earned through humiliation. It can be chosen, freely given, and freely received. The cabin was proof. Every crooked chair, every uneven table, every patched wall, they weren't flaws. They were milestones. They were the evidence of a man who had been shattered and was piecing himself back together stronger than before.
I wasn't whole yet. The ghosts of my father's voice, my mother's tears, my brother's smirk, they still haunted me. But they no longer owned me.
For the first time in my life, I believed I was building something worth keeping, and deep down I knew this was only the beginning. Healing was still ahead. A confrontation I could no longer avoid was waiting for me. But now, for the first time, I felt strong enough to face it. The lake house gave me strength. Every nail I drove into its beams, every board I sanded smooth, every laugh shared with friends. It rebuilt not just the cabin, but me. Still one truth gnawed at me: I could patch the roof, repaint the walls, fill the rooms with people who loved me. But the ghosts of my family still lingered, and ghosts don't leave until you face them. The call came on a rainy afternoon. My phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in months: Daniel. For a moment I considered letting it ring, letting it fade into silence like all the others before. But something inside me whispered, "It's time," I answered. His voice was quieter than I remembered, stripped of its usual smug confidence. "Ethan," he said, pausing like the name was heavy. "Mum and Dad, they want to see you, please. Just come home for dinner." Every part of me resisted. Memories of humiliation flared: the BMW keys, the piggy bank, the laughter that cut deeper than knives. But another voice, smaller but steady, reminded me, "You've built enough strength to face this." So I agreed. Walking into my parents' house felt like stepping back in time. The smell of roast beef and potatoes hung in the air, just like it had every Sunday growing up. The same family portraits lined the hallway, except in every one, Daniel's achievements took center stage. His graduation, his trophies, his promotions. My face was there always, in the background, blurred, half hidden. My mother Margaret stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she wiped them on her apron. My father Richard sat at the head of the table, back straight, eyes hard but tired. Daniel hovered by the window, hands shoved in his pockets, avoiding my gaze. The silence was suffocating. I broke it by placing something on the table, an old photo album. My hands shook, but my voice was steady. "Before we eat, there's something I need you to see."
I opened the album.
First, a picture of me at 8, on stage at my piano recital. The front row empty. Next, my high school graduation photo. Daniel grinning with my parents at his side, me standing alone in my cap and gown. Another, my 21st birthday. Daniel cutting into a cake me in the corner with a sweater 2 sizes too big. Page after page, the evidence piled up. My life in pictures, but never fully in frame. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father shifted, his jaw tightening. Daniel stepped closer, eyes widening as though seeing it all for the first time. "You never clapped?" I said, my voice breaking but growing stronger with each word. "Not once." "Every time I looked for you in the crowd, you were looking at him. Every achievement I had, you brushed aside. And when you handed me that piggy bank while giving him a BMW, that wasn't just a joke. That was my life. That was all I ever was to you, a shadow, a wallet, a mistake." Richard's face reddened. For a second I thought he'd erupt the way he always had, but then he slumped back, suddenly looking older. "I thought," his voice cracked, "I thought Daniel needed us more. He was destined for great things. You were steady, reliable. I thought you didn't need the praise." The words sliced through me, not because they were cruel, but because they were careless. A lifetime of neglect born not of hatred, but blindness.
Margaret's tears spilled over. "I didn't see," she whispered. "God forgive me, Ethan, I didn't see what I was doing to you."
Daniel finally spoke, his voice unsteady. I knew I was the favorite. I didn't ask for it, but I didn't stop it either. I let them put me on a pedestal while you stood in the shadows. I should have spoken up. I'm sorry. For years I had dreamed of this moment. I thought it would feel like victory, like revenge. But as they sat before me, broken, guilty, stripped of their defenses, I didn't feel triumph. I felt tired. I dropped into a chair, my head in my hands. "I don't need your guilt," I said quietly. "I don't need apologies you can't back up. What I need is for you to finally see me. Not as Daniel's shadow, not as the disappointment. Just me." Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't suffocating, it was searching. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling as it found mine. "What can we do now?" I looked at her, then at Richard, then Daniel, their faces etched with regret, their eyes pleading. "You can start by respecting my boundaries. Stop asking me to sacrifice for Daniel. Stop pretending my pain didn't happen. If you want to be in my life, then you meet me where I am, not where you think I should be." For the first time, Richard nodded. No argument, no thunder, just a weary, humble nod. Margaret squeezed my hand. Daniel swallowed hard. "You're not a shadow, Ethan. You never were. I just didn't want to admit how much of my light came from you." Tears blurred my vision, but I let them fall. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. It wasn't about pretending the piggy bank never existed or that the BMW didn't crush me. Healing was about this moment. Truth laid bare the walls, cracking light seeping through. That night, we ate together. Not in celebration of Daniel, not in silence about me, just a family tentative, but real sharing a meal that tasted more of honesty than roast beef. As I left, my father's voice followed me to the door, softer than I had ever heard it. "Come back soon, son." It wasn't perfect, it wasn't everything I had longed for, but it was enough to open the door to something new. Driving back to the lake house, the rain easing into drizzle, I realized the truth. I couldn't change the past, but I could choose what came next. And for the first time in my life, what came next felt like hope. A year later, Christmas looked nothing like the one that had broken me. The lake house glowed under a canopy of string lights, their reflections dancing on the frozen lake. Inside, the long wooden table I'd built with my own hands groaned under the weight of food, roast turkey casseroles, pies brought by friends who had become my chosen family. Laughter and chatter filled the air, weaving warmth into every corner of the home that had once been hollow. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing it all in. The sound of music inside, the glow spilling through the windows, the scent of pine and cinnamon. For the first time in my life, Christmas wasn't something I dreaded. It was something I belonged to. As the evening settled, Sarah clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "Time for presents," she announced, her smile wide. Friends gathered around the tree, exchanging small gifts, laughing at inside jokes. I watched heart swelling as one by one they unwrapped tokens of care scarves, books, silly mugs. It was imperfect, mismatched, and yet it felt more genuine than any holiday I had known before. Then the knock came. The room fell quiet. Everyone glanced toward the door. My chest tightened, an old instinct urging me to hide. But I steadied myself, walked across the creaking floorboards and pulled it open. There they were, my mother Margaret clutching a cake box with trembling hands, my father Richard standing straighter than I expected, though his eyes betrayed nerves I'd never seen in him, and Daniel, my brother, his usual confident smirk, gone replaced by something softer, uncertainty, maybe even humility. For a moment no one spoke. Snowflakes drifted around them, the cold biting at our silence. Then Margaret held out the box.
"Happy birthday, Ethan," she said quietly. "We know we're late, but this one's only for you."
She opened it just enough for me to see a small cake plane with a single candle in the center. The weight of it hit me like a flood. A lifetime of birthdays overshadowed, forgotten, dismissed, and now finally one that was mine. Tears blurred my vision, but I stepped aside. "Come in," I said. They entered hesitantly, greeted by my friends with cautious warmth. Chairs were pulled up, plates passed down the line. For a moment it was awkward, two worlds colliding, the old and the new. But then conversation began to flow. My father asked Sarah about the repairs she'd helped me with. My mother complimented the shelves I had built. Daniel even laughed at a story from one of my neighbors, and for once it wasn't at my expense. When the cake was brought out, everyone gathered around. The room dimmed as Sarah lit the single candle. The flame flickered, reflecting in every eye turned toward me. They sang, off-key, too loud, stumbling over the words, but it was for me, all of it. I stared at the candle, my throat tight, my heart pounding. The boy inside me, the boy who stood alone on graduation day, who opened sweaters while his brother unwrapped laptops, who held a piggy bank while his brother received BMW keys, that boy wept. But the man I had become stood steady. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a wish. Not for their approval, not for revenge, not even for things to go back to the way they were. Just for this imperfect, fragile, genuine moment to last.
I blew out the candle. The room erupted in cheers. Margaret leaned over, kissed my cheek, whispering, "I see you now." Richard raised his glass, his voice steady. "To my son." And Daniel, eyes shining, clinked his glass against mine. "To my brother."
Tears slipped down my cheeks, but I didn't hide them. For once I wasn't ashamed of being seen. The night stretched on. Stories were told, laughter rang, the fire crackled in the hearth. And as I looked around, friends, neighbors, family by blood and family by choice, I realized something. Reunion wasn't about pretending the past hadn't happened. It wasn't about erasing the piggy bank or the BMW. It was about building something new on the ruins, stronger, honest, real. Later, when everyone had gone and the cabin was quiet again, I stood by the window, staring at the snow settling on the lake. On the shelf sat the piggy bank, still cracked, taped together, its rattle faint when I moved it. I placed it back gently. It was no longer a symbol of humiliation. It was proof of survival, proof that I had taken the shards of what was given to me and built a life of my own. For the first time I whispered into the silence, "I matter." And the silence answered back, not with emptiness but with peace.
"Home,"